Pierre, I'm curious what your thoughts are about the Hyman-Minsky model that talks about debt deflation and the risks that occur when debts begin to rise faster than earning power.
Well, obviously, if the reason that, or one of the reasons that the Federal Reserve is artificially depressing interest rates is because it recognizes the enormity of the debt that everybody is carrying, right? The individuals, corporations, the US government. The only reason a lot of debtors can continue to service the debt is because the payments are so low. We found out during the housing crisis, when you take out a teaser rate on your mortgage, when the teaser rate matures, a lot of people can't pay the mortgage. But a lot of people didn't care because they figured, well, the house price is going to go up, and so I'll refinance or I'll sell at a profit. But so when you have a lot of debt, the interest rate is very important. But even to the point where if the debt gets so large that even at such low interest rates, you can't afford to make the payments. During the housing bubble, a lot of people would point out, all this home equity, because I kept saying we have too much debt. And they would say, yes, but look at all the home equity. And I would always come back and say, well, the home equity is temporary. The debt is permanent until it's defaulted on. So you may have a lot of equity in your house, but what happens if the market price of your house goes down? All that equity is gone, but the debt's still there. And so what the Fed is trying to do is keep us from insolvency by artificially suppressing rates. But by artificially suppressing rates, they allow the insolvent to go even deeper into debt. So ultimately, when they do go bankrupt, because it's going to happen just by the law of numbers, when we all do go broke, it's a much bigger crisis because we've accumulated far more debt.
Mike, I want you to have an opportunity to debate here on the affirmative. You've been very descriptive in your analysis of the historical function of the way markets have worked. I'm curious, if we were to see someday Chairman Green at the Fed, what's your prescriptive analysis for what this economy needs?
So ironically, this is where I think that the frustration comes, because I agree with some of what Peter is saying, right? It is very clear that the Fed has been captured by the need to protect asset prices. But that's a very different statement than saying that the Fed is, artificially suppressing interest rates and driving all the behavior that we're seeing, right? We have fundamental problems in the setup of our society right now, where we have actually chosen to abrogate our responsibilities to many of the individuals in our society. I would suggest Peter's suggestion that we just allow ourselves to liquidate stocks, liquidate labor, liquidate the farmers, et cetera, as the right prescription is just a further abrogation of that, right? The elites, unfortunately, of which I happen to be one, Peter is one as well, have by and large checked out of the system and their need to actually contribute back into it. We've chosen to create conditions, and it's interesting to see the Biden administration begin to move in the direction of saying we need to normalize tax rates so that corporations are not able to shop their tax rates all over the world, right? We are creating conditions in the United States where we are choosing to apply debt structures to decisions like student loans or student education that is just fundamentally a mistake, right? That's an investment in human capital that should be treated as equity at the societal level. We can choose how we decide to allocate that and reward it. But ultimately, we need to encourage the free market, and this is, again, to Peter's point, to provide us with those solutions. So allow private sector individuals to subsidize and pay for colleges and differentiate between somebody who's getting an engineering degree and somebody who's doing an underwater basket weaving degree from, East Bumblefuck University. The underlying characteristic is to allow the return of the private sector, but to cushion that process and to encourage the fundamental investment and innovation at the human capital, and more importantly, actually, I would argue at the energy level, that increases the resources that are available. That's what you need to do. It's a labor capital ratio. You can do one of two things. You can increase the quantity of capital that is ultimately available. And that can be in the form of better health, better human capital in the form of education. It can be in the form of improved infrastructure, et cetera, that facilitates the creation of the opportunities that allow us to get out of this.
Before we continue, help us by smashing that YouTube like button and subscribe now to this channel. This shows the algorithm that you value the information, and it helps us spread this message. Sharing is caring. Please like and subscribe now. Thank you. And now, let's continue.
I 100% agree, but the best way, or probably the only way to achieve that, is through a free market. The government just has to get out of the way to allow all that to happen. The free market allocates capital, it allocates labor. The government can't do it because there is no profit motive to guide it. There is no pricing structure. The government has no way of knowing if what it's doing is adding value or subtracting value. But the free market does. Individuals will pursue their own self-interest in a free market, and people will get the education that they need, and entrepreneurs will find ways of providing it, for a fee in competition with other entrepreneurs. I mean, but right now we have the government erecting all sorts of barriers to the things that you want. And so what we just need is to take down those barriers so that the free market can do what the free market does best. What the government is supposed to do is simply protect our lives, liberty, and property. That's what it's supposed to do. It's not supposed to interfere to try to improve our lives. It's simply supposed to protect our rights. So
unfortunately, I think that's, again, we agree in a broader prescription, but the actual mechanics of what you're describing, Peter, are really, really hard to achieve, right? Does the government protect me against Google? Does the government?
You don't need protection against Google. Google can't force you to use their search engine. How's Google going to hurt you?
Peter, that is simply not true. That is simply not true. The world that we inhabit, in order for me to be a productive member of our society, I have to use these services. I have to use electricity for my local utility. I have to access the internet. I have to use search engine.
Right, but to worry about Google and say, hey, we need this big, strong, powerful government to protect me from Google, the big threat to your liberty and freedom is the government, not Google. And if we had less government, we'd probably have more search engines. If we had fewer barriers to entry, if we had no corporate income tax at all, if we got rid of a lot of these rules and regulations, we'd have a much more competitive free market, and you would probably have more search engines. Now, of course, there are other ones. You don't have to search with Google. There are other ones that you can use. Maybe you think Google is the best one, and so that's why you use it. But Google doesn't even charge you. It's free. I mean, how are you complaining about something you're getting for free?
Well, Peter, one of the questions that occurs is the formation of monopolies in free markets. And you could imagine, for example, a system where you have to apply to a job through LinkedIn. And if LinkedIn becomes the de facto monopoly, is there a role hypothetically for government to play in regulating that market so there is competition?
History shows that generally when there's a monopoly, it's because the government grants it. The same thing for cartels. Governments are great at selling monopolies and then punishing people who compete with the entity to which they granted that privileged position. But to the extent that somebody achieves a monopoly without any government protection, if somebody achieves a monopoly, maybe go back to John D. Rockefeller at Standard Oil, to the extent that someone achieves a monopoly by just providing the best product at such a cheap price that nobody can compete, there's nothing wrong with that. If you go back to the breakup of Standard Oil, it wasn't Standard Oil's customers that were complaining. It was the competitors that couldn't do as good a job. They were the ones that were complaining. So we busted up Standard Oil, not to benefit the consumers, but to benefit their less efficient competitors. So no, I would have put my faith in a free market to regulate competition, because whenever the government gets involved, it screws things up.
What to do in such a situation? Inform yourself and keep your financial education strong. We from the Compact Group offer our loyal subscribers a free educational portal with first-hand monetary, financial, and economic knowledge. Enter our invite-only Insider Club by clicking the link below. You will get access to first-class information far earlier than the rest. We have prepared a special deal for all our members where you can access a giant pool of Robert Kiyosaki's financial wisdom for just $1. To find out more, simply click the link below and join our Insider Club absolutely free. But there is more you can and should do. Build up several streams of income. More and more people realize that they have to take their future in their own hands, but they don't know how and where to start. We from Compact offer our Insider Club members unique opportunities. Strengthen your financial muscle and get the edge. Click the link below. Become part of our free Insider Club. No financial obligations. But there's one important thing you have to know. You have to become active. So do it now. Become active and see you on the other side.